She tried to take his belongings. He let her, then said, "You forgot one thing, my name as chief." The sun had just begun its slow climb over the vast plains, turning the sky a soft shade of orange and gold. Chief Dakota stood at the edge of his camp, his gaze sweeping over the tall grasses that swayed with the morning wind. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth, wildflowers, and the faint trace of smoke from the cooking fires. His people moved about with purpose, preparing for the seasonal hunt. Children laughed and chased one another, their voices ringing like wind chimes across the open land. Women moved gracefully between the lodges, tending fires, mending clothes, and arranging supplies. Warriors sharpened their weapons and tested their bows, their movements precise and confident. Dakota's eyes, sharp and watchful, missed nothing. Years of leading his people had taught him the value of observation, of knowing what was happening even in the smallest corner of the camp. His expression was calm, almost serene, but behind his quiet demeanor lay a mind that never rested. He understood the plains, the people, and the balance of respect, honor, and survival. It was during this tranquil morning that Dakota noticed a figure at the edge of the camp. She was a stranger, moving with cautious steps, her eyes scanning the lodges and supplies as if she were looking for something. Or someone. Her hair was dark and tied loosely behind her head. Her clothes were worn, patched in several places, suggesting a long journey. She seemed small, almost fragile, but the confidence in her movements told a different story. Dakota did not move. He simply watched. The woman crouched near a stack of blankets and a small pile of tools, her hands brushing over the items, checking for valuables. She was careful, but not careful enough. Dakota's experience had taught him to notice the smallest signs of intrusion, the way she hesitated before picking up a knife, the quick glance over her shoulder, the way her shoulders tensed at the slightest sound. "She thinks she is clever," Dakota murmured to himself, a faint smile touching his lips. But cleverness alone does not win respect. He stepped back into the shadow of a nearby tree, letting her continue. Dakota had faced thieves and strangers before, but this was not a moment for anger. Anger could cloud judgment. Wisdom, patience, and foresight were far more powerful. He would let her take what she thought she could, and then he would teach her the lesson she did not yet understand. The woman finally picked up a small bundle of supplies, wrapping them carefully in a cloth. She glanced around once more, her eyes narrowing as she made sure no one was watching. Then, with swift, silent steps, she began to move away from the lodges and toward the edge of the camp. Dakota followed silently, keeping his distance, his shadow blending with the tall grasses. He could see the tension in her movements, the excitement mixed with fear. She believed she was winning, that her plan was successful. But she did not know that in this camp, respect was more important than possessions. She did not know the ways of the people she had entered. Dakota's mind drifted briefly to the stories his father had told him when he was a boy. Stories of warriors who had used force when patience would have served them better. Stories of chiefs who had let wisdom guide their actions rather than anger. His father had taught him that every action, no matter how small, carried meaning, and every lesson, no matter how harsh, could be taught with respect. The woman paused near the edge of the camp, her eyes scanning the horizon. She crouched again, pulling a small knife from her bundle. She began to examine the contents carefully, counting items and making quick notes. Dakota watched, noting every detail. She was not just a thief. She was clever, resourceful, and determined. But she had not yet learned what mattered most in the lands she had entered. He stepped closer, his presence still hidden by the natural cover of the grasses. His hand rested lightly on the hilt of his knife, though he had no intention of drawing it. Force was not needed. Not yet. Observation and patience were far more powerful. The stranger's eyes flicked toward a nearby lodge where a small group of children played. For a brief moment, her expression softened, almost as if she remembered a home she had left behind. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by the sharp focus of someone used to taking what she needed. Dakota felt a flicker of curiosity. Who was she? What had brought her to this place? And why had she chosen his camp? He stepped even closer, careful to remain in the shadow of the grasses. The morning light caught the edge of his feathers, glinting faintly in the sun, but the woman did not notice. She was too absorbed in her task, counting and sorting the items she had taken. Dakota could see the pride in her movements, the quiet thrill of success. He suppressed a laugh, finding amusement in her confidence. Then, as she prepared to leave the camp entirely, Dakota spoke. His voice was calm, measured, and carried easily across the open plains. "You forget something," he said. The woman froze, her eyes darting around. She could not see him, but the words sank deep, carrying a weight she had not expected. Her fingers tightened on the bundle of supplies, and for the first time, a flicker of fear crossed her face. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice trembling slightly. Dakota stepped into view slowly, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. His eyes met hers, steady and unyielding. "I am Dakota," he said, "chief of this camp. And you have entered without respect." The woman's mouth opened, then closed. She took a step back, realizing that the situation was far more serious than she had imagined. She had expected anger, perhaps a chase, maybe even a confrontation with warriors. But this calm, controlled presence was something she had not anticipated. I I did not know," she stammered. "I only... I needed..." Dakota shook his head gently. "Need does not excuse disrespect. You took what was not yours, but you forgot the first rule of these lands. You must know the chief. You must know my name." The woman's hands tightened on the bundle, and for the first time she felt the weight of her actions. She had entered a place where every name carried power, every gesture carried meaning, and every person had a place in the balance of the camp. She had acted without thought, without respect, and now she faced the consequence, not through violence, but through understanding. Dakota's gaze softened, though his voice remained firm. "You may leave with what you have taken. But remember this, a warrior's strength is not measured by what he takes or what he keeps. It is measured by honor, respect, and the wisdom to know when to act and when to wait." The woman's eyes met his, wide and uncertain. She nodded slowly, understanding that her actions had been seen, measured, and judged, not with anger, but with wisdom. She felt a mixture of relief and shame. Relief that she would not be harmed, shame that she had entered this place so carelessly. Dakota stepped closer, his shadow falling over her as he spoke again. "Remember my name. Remember this lesson, and if you ever return, do so with respect, or you will find that the plains are not so forgiving." The woman lowered her gaze, understanding the depth of his words. She gathered her bundle, moving carefully toward the edge of the camp. Dakota followed silently, watching her disappear into the tall grasses, knowing that she had learned more than she had expected that morning. As she vanished from sight, Dakota returned to the center of his camp, his eyes scanning the people around him. The children still played, the warriors still trained, and the women continued their work. The balance of the camp remained steady and unbroken. He breathed deeply, feeling the wind on his face and the warmth of the rising sun. The plains stretched endlessly before him, a land of freedom, challenge, and lessons waiting to be learned. And he knew, as he always had, that a true leader's power lay not in the strength of his arm, but in the clarity of his mind and the patience of his heart. Dakota turned back to his people, offering a small smile. Today had begun as any other, but it had already carried a lesson for one who thought herself cleverer than the chief. He would watch, wait, and guide, as he always did. And the plains, wide and unending, would carry the story of the morning for as long as the wind remembered. The woman had disappeared into the tall grasses, her bundle of stolen supplies swinging lightly against her side. The morning sun climbed higher, painting the plains with golden light, but the thrill of her theft was fading. A strange feeling gnawed at her chest, unease mixed with curiosity. She had taken what she wanted, yet the words of the chief echoed in her mind. "You forgot my name, the first rule of these lands." She slowed her pace, glancing back toward the camp. The lodges were distant, smoke curling upward from their fires. No one was chasing her, and yet she could not shake the sense that she had been watched the entire time. Something about the calm, steady voice of the chief had unsettled her in a way she had never experienced before. Her name was Ayana. She had traveled far across the plains, surviving on her own wit and courage. She had learned to move quietly, to take what she needed, and to rely on her cleverness. But Dakota was different. He had not shouted, not threatened, not even raised his hand. Yet in his quiet authority, she felt the weight of his power. She found a small rise of land and crouched, setting down her bundle. From this vantage, she could see the camp in the distance. Her eyes scanned the lodges, the fires, and the figures moving with purpose. The chief's words came back to her, sharper now. Remember my name. Remember this lesson? She frowned, trying to make sense of them. What did he mean? What kind of test was this? Meanwhile, Dakota returned to the center of his camp, his mind not on anger or punishment, but on observation. He knew the woman would not disappear easily. The plains had a way of teaching those who did not respect its rules, and he was a part of the plains as much as the grasses, the wind, and the sun. He spoke quietly to one of his warriors, a young man named Mado. Watch the edges of the camp, he instructed. Do not interfere unless it is necessary. Let her learn what she does not yet understand. Mado nodded, his eyes following the direction Dakota indicated. He understood his chief's wisdom. Often the greatest lessons were taught without force, without anger, without even confrontation. Patience and observation were far more powerful than swords or arrows. Ayana, meanwhile, gathered her bundle and began to move again. She had thought she understood survival, but now a new feeling took root. She had faced harsh weather, wild animals, and even hostile strangers, but she had never met someone like Dakota. His calm had unsettled her, and the idea of returning to the camp without understanding the lesson filled her with fear and curiosity at the same time. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke, reminding her that she was close to the camp. She crouched behind a small rise of rocks and peered down. The warriors moved about, tending to their duties, but no one seemed to notice her. She thought of slipping past them and leaving the camp entirely, but something made her pause. She could not explain it, but the chief's presence seemed to linger even in his absence. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the grasses. Mado, the young warrior. Ayana froze, holding her breath. He raised his hands slowly, a gesture of peace. Chief Dakota wishes to speak with you, he said quietly. He means no harm. Come willingly, or you may find the plains less forgiving. Ayana's heart raced. She had been ready to flee, but now she realized that running might not be the wisest choice. She looked toward the camp once more, the lodges and fires bathed in golden light. Then, with a deep breath, she stood and followed Mato. They walked in silence, the grasses brushing against their legs, the wind carrying the distant sounds of the camp. Mato did not speak again, and neither did she. The quiet was heavy with anticipation, as if the plains themselves held their breath. Finally, they reached the edge of the camp. Dakota was waiting, standing near a large lodge. His presence was calm, commanding, and yet not threatening. The sun glinted off the feathers in his hair, and his eyes held a mixture of curiosity and patience. You returned, Dakota said simply. Ayana nodded, unsure what to say. Her mind raced with questions, but the words would not come. Dakota gestured toward a small circle of stones nearby, a place where the elders often spoke to teach lessons. Sit, he said. We will speak here. She obeyed, sitting on the soft grass, her bundle resting beside her. Dakota took a position opposite her, his posture relaxed but alert. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the silence stretching like the plains themselves. Why did you take from my camp? Dakota asked finally, his voice calm, almost gentle. Ayana hesitated. I needed the supplies. I was hungry, and I thought I could take what I needed without being seen. Dakota nodded slowly. You thought you could take what was not yours. You believed that cleverness alone would protect you. But you forgot the first rule of these lands. Ayana's brow furrowed. The first rule? Yes, Dakota replied. You must know the chief. You must know my name. Respect is the foundation of these plains. Strength without respect is empty. Ayana looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the bundle. She had taken many things in her life, yet no one had ever spoken to her this way. The chief did not raise his hand, did not threaten her, yet she felt the weight of his words more than any sword or arrow could deliver. Do you understand? Dakota asked, his eyes steady. Ayana nodded slowly. think. I think I do. Dakota's lips curved into a faint smile. Then you are ready for the next lesson. Her eyes widened. Next lesson, she whispered. Yes, Dakota said. The plains are not only a place to survive, they are a place to learn. You have survived by taking, but now you must learn to see, to wait, and to understand. That is the way of the Lakota. That is the way of a warrior. He gestured toward the horizon. Out there, beyond the grasses, there is much to test you. You will see that cleverness alone cannot guide you. Wisdom, patience, and respect will. Ayana felt a mix of fear and excitement. She had never been tested like this before. Every challenge she had faced had been about strength or speed, cunning or stealth. But this was different. She realized that the chief was not trying to punish her. He was guiding her. Dakota stood and began to walk slowly across the plain, motioning for her to follow. She rose, clutching her bundle, and followed cautiously. The wind blew across the grasses, carrying the faint scent of smoke, wildflowers, and the earth itself. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighted with the awareness that she was being watched, measured, and taught. They walked for some time, the camp fading behind them, the horizon stretching endlessly before them. Dakota spoke occasionally, not with commands, but with observations. He pointed out the tracks of animals, the direction of the wind, and the way the grasses bent in the breeze. Every detail was a lesson, though she did not yet understand all of it. Finally, they reached a small clearing near a stream. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and the sound of its flow was soothing. Dakota knelt by the edge of the stream, gesturing for Ayana to do the same. Watch carefully, he said. The stream teaches more than you think. She crouched beside him, her eyes following the flow of water. Dakota's gaze was steady as he continued. The stream moves, but it does not rush. It shapes the land, carves paths, and nourishes life. Strength is not in force, but in direction and patience. A warrior moves like the stream. Observe, wait, and act only when the time is right. Ayana watched the water, feeling the truth in his words. She realized that all her life she had acted too quickly, relying on speed and cleverness. She had taken what she wanted without thinking of consequences. But here by the stream, she understood that there was another way, a way of patience, observation, and respect. Dakota watched her closely, noting the subtle shift in her expression. You have the heart of one who survives, he said. But you must learn the heart of one who leads. That is the next test. Ayana's eyes met his, filled with determination. Ah, I will try, she said softly. Dakota nodded. Then the plains will teach you. Follow closely, watch carefully, and remember my name. That is the first step toward understanding these lands and their people. The wind rose, carrying the grasses in waves. The sun continued its climb, casting long shadows across the plain. And in that moment, Ayana felt the weight of her journey, the beginning of a lesson that would test her courage, patience, and understanding far more than any theft or chase ever could. For the first time, she realized that survival alone was not enough. She needed wisdom, and she had found a teacher in Dakota, the chief of the plains. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, turning the plains a brilliant gold. The grasses swayed in waves under the gentle wind, and the distant mountains glimmered like sentinels over the land. Ayada followed Chief Dakota closely, her bundle secured on her back. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, weighed down not by the supplies she carried, but by the lessons she had begun to understand. Dakota's eyes were always ahead, scanning the horizon, noting every shift in the wind, every movement in the grasses. Though he said little, each glance and gesture carried meaning. Ayana had learned to watch, to notice the smallest detail, and to think before she acted. But even now, she did not fully understand what awaited her. You must learn to trust your eyes, not only your hands, Dakota said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, yet it carried authority that could not be ignored. The plains teach patience, but they also test courage. You will see that soon. Ayana nodded, gripping the straps of her bundle tighter. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had survived harsh weather, dangerous animals, and even thieves. But something in Dakota's presence made her feel as if the land itself were watching her. They walked for some time, following the gentle curve of a distant ridge. Birds circled above, their cries echoing across the open plains. The grasses grew taller and denser, and the air carried the scent of wildflowers and damp earth. Finally, they arrived at a narrow canyon, its walls rising steeply on either side. A small stream ran through the bottom, its water clear and cold. Here, Dakota said, gesturing toward the canyon, this is where your first trial begins. You will not be harmed, but you must face what lies ahead with courage and wisdom. Ayana's eyes widened. The canyon looked daunting. She could see loose rocks, sharp drops, and shadows that hid unknown dangers. A sense of fear prickled at her spine, but she knew she could not turn back. Dakota's gaze rested on her, steady and patient, and she felt a strange reassurance in his presence. What must I do? She asked quietly. Cross the canyon? Dakota replied simply. Use your eyes. Use your mind. Use your courage. The plains will guide you if you listen. Ayana swallowed hard. She had crossed rivers, climbed cliffs, and navigated forests, but this canyon felt different. It demanded more than strength. It demanded thought, patience, and respect for the land itself. She stepped carefully to the edge, her eyes scanning the terrain below. Loose rocks littered the path and the stream sparkled deceptively, hiding slippery stones beneath. Dakota knelt nearby, watching without offering guidance. The land will not tell you its secrets all at once, he said. You must watch, you must wait, and you must move when the time is right. Ayana took a deep breath, calming her racing heart. She lowered herself carefully, testing each foothold before shifting her weight. The canyon was narrow in places, forcing her to balance on uneven stones. The stream gurgled below, a constant reminder that one wrong step could lead to a fall. Halfway across, she paused, her fingers brushing against the rough canyon wall. A sudden gust of wind swept through, making her lose her balance. Her heart leapt into her throat, and for a moment fear threatened to paralyze her. But she remembered Dakota's words. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting despite fear. She focused on the path ahead, each careful step guided by observation rather than haste. Loose stones shifted beneath her weight, but she adjusted quickly, listening to the sound of the rocks and the stream. Slowly, steadily, she moved forward, her mind alert to every detail. Dakota observed her silently. He noted her hesitation, her growing confidence, and the way she began to trust her instincts. He did not intervene, for this was not a trial he could complete for her. She had to learn to face danger with wisdom, patience, and courage on her own. Suddenly, a shadow flickered across the canyon floor. Ayana froze, her eyes darting toward the movement. A coyote emerged from the brush, its eyes curious and sharp. It paused, watching her, then darted back into the grasses. Her heart pounded, but she realized the creature posed no real threat. The plains were alive, and every living thing had a place. She felt a strange connection to the coyote, as if it were reminding her that fear must be balanced with understanding. She continued, her confidence growing. Each careful step taught her more about patience, observation, and the rhythm of the land. The canyon, once intimidating, began to feel like a teacher rather than a threat. She realized that survival alone was not enough. She had to respect the land, the challenges, and the lessons it offered. Near the midpoint, the path narrowed sharply, forcing her to move sideways along a ledge above the stream. Her hands pressed against the rough rock for balance. The loose stone gave way beneath her foot, sending a small cascade into the water below. She froze, heart racing, then took a deep breath and adjusted her stance. One careful step at a time, she moved forward, her mind focused on balance, observation, and calm. Dakota remained nearby, his eyes following every movement. He could see the lesson taking hold. Fear had not stopped her. Hesitation had taught her patience. Observation had guided her steps. Courage, tempered by wisdom, had allowed her to continue. Finally, she reached the other side of the canyon. She stepped onto solid ground, her legs trembling but her spirit unbroken. The canyon behind her was a testament to the lessons she had learned. Fear was a teacher, observation was a guide, and courage was the key to survival and understanding. Dakota approached her, his expression calm but approving. "You have done well," he said. "Many who face the canyon turn back. Many who fear the unknown stumble. But you have learned to act with thought and courage. That is the mark of a true warrior." Ayana exhaled, relief and pride mingling in her chest. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and the challenge of the canyon, and she had survived, not only with skill, but with wisdom. She realized that the lessons Dakota offered were not just about survival, but about understanding the world and herself. "The plains have more to teach," Dakota continued. "This was only the beginning." A warrior does not rely on strength alone. Cleverness is useful, but it must be guided by patience, observation, and respect. "You have taken the first step." Ayana nodded, her eyes bright with determination.
I understand, she said. I want to learn.
"I want to understand." Dakota smiled faintly. "Good. That is the beginning. The next lesson will test more than your courage. It will test your understanding of people, your respect for others, and your ability to act wisely in difficult situations. The plains will provide the challenges, but you must bring your mind and heart to meet them." She followed him back toward the camp, her steps lighter now, her mind sharper. The canyon had tested her, taught her, and strengthened her in ways she had not expected. She realized that cleverness alone would not carry her forward. Observation, patience, courage, and respect were far more important and far more powerful. As they neared the camp, Dakota paused and looked toward the horizon. "One day you will face choices that will affect not only yourself, but others as well. How you act and how you understand will determine your path. Remember the canyon, remember your courage, and remember the lessons of patience and observation." Ayana's heart swelled with a new sense of purpose. She had crossed the canyon, faced fear, and survived. But she knew the journey was only beginning. Dakota's guidance was shaping her not just into a survivor, but into someone who could understand the land, the people, and the balance that held everything together. The sun dipped slightly toward the west, casting long shadows across the plains. The camp was visible in the distance, smoke curling from the lodges, children playing, and warriors tending to their duties. Ayana felt a connection to the land, to Dakota, and to the lesson she had begun to understand. She realized that the journey would be long, that the tests would grow more challenging, but she was ready to face them. Dakota walked beside her, silent and watchful. He did not need to speak. The lessons had been clear. Courage tempered by wisdom, patience guided by observation, and respect for the land and its people were the true measures of a warrior. Ayana understood that the path ahead would not be easy, but she also knew that with Dakota's guidance, she would learn more than she ever thought possible. The plains stretched endlessly before them, golden in the afternoon sun. Ayana walked with a newfound confidence, her steps guided by observation, courage, and respect. The canyon had tested her body and mind, but it had also opened her heart. She knew that the lessons of the plains were far from over, and that her journey with Chief Dakota had only just begun. The sky had begun to turn soft shades of pink and gold as the sun slowly descended toward the horizon. The plains stretched endlessly, a sea of swaying grasses that seemed to ripple with the wind. Ayana followed Chief Dakota quietly, her senses alert, her heart steady but full of anticipation. Today, she would face the final test, the trial that would determine whether she had truly learned the lessons of the land, the people, and the ways of the Lakota. The chief led her to a broad clearing near a cluster of rocks, where shadows already began to stretch long and dark. He stopped and turned to face her. "This is where your last lesson begins," he said. "It will test your courage, your wisdom, and your respect for others. You must act not only for yourself, but for the people you may influence. Are you ready?" Ayana took a deep breath, her mind steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "I am ready," she said. Her voice was calm, yet determined. She understood now that readiness was not about fearlessness, but about courage in the presence of fear. Dakota nodded, his eyes calm but piercing. "Good. Watch carefully, think carefully, and act wisely. Remember the canyon, the stream, and all you have learned. Today, you will see the true meaning of respect and leadership." He led her to the center of the clearing. There, several young warriors from the camp were gathered, practicing skills and listening attentively to Dakota's guidance. Ayana noticed that they had been watching her arrival, their expressions curious and cautious. She realized that part of her trial was not only the land, but also the people she was now among. "Your challenge is simple," Dakota said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "A group of strangers will approach. They do not know our ways. They may test you, tempt you, or even challenge your actions. You must respond not with anger or force, but with understanding, courage, and respect. This is the measure of a true warrior." Ayana's eyes widened slightly. "Strangers?" she asked. Dakota nodded.
Yes, they will arrive soon.
"Your task is to guide them, to correct them if they are wrong, and to act with wisdom. You must protect what is important without striking out in anger. You must lead, not dominate." She nodded again, feeling the weight of his words. Her hands flexed at her sides, ready yet restrained. She had learned to move quickly, to think clearly, and to act wisely. Now she would need all of that and more. The wind shifted, carrying a faint sound from the horizon. Dust rose in the distance, and soon figures appeared. A group of travelers was approaching, unsteady on their feet, carrying bundles and looking lost. Aayana could see that some of them were curious, others wary. She realized that they would not understand the rules of the camp, and some might even try to take what was not theirs. Her first instinct was to step forward to confront them, but she remembered Dakota's words: act with courage, wisdom, and respect. She breathed deeply, letting the calm of the plains guide her. She stepped into the clearing, her posture confident but not threatening, and addressed the strangers. "Welcome to this land," she said clearly. "I am Ayana, a student of Chief Takoda. You must respect this place and its people. Take only what is given, ask before you act, and follow the rules of the camp." The strangers hesitated, surprised by her calm authority. One of them, a young man, stepped forward, holding a bundle of food. "We are lost," he said.
We mean no harm. We were hungry and tired. Ayana's heart softened slightly.
She understood their fear and need. "Then rest here," she said gently. "Share what you have, and you will be cared for. But remember to respect these lands and the people who live here. The chief's name and guidance must always be honored." She watched as the strangers nodded, their expressions a mixture of relief and curiosity. She guided them toward a small area near the stream, where food and water were available, showing them how to move carefully and avoid stepping on fragile grasses. Every word, every gesture carried the lessons Dakota had taught her. Observation, patience, courage, and respect guided her actions. Dakota watched silently from a short distance, a faint smile on his face. He could see that Ayana had learned the most important lessons of all. She was not only surviving, but leading. Her courage was balanced with wisdom. Her actions reflected understanding, not impulse. She had become a true student of the plains. One of the strangers, a young woman, made a sudden move toward a pile of blankets. Ayana stepped forward gently, placing a hand on her shoulder.
Wait, she said. Ask first.
Take only what is offered. Respect the people and the land. That is the way of this place. The young woman froze, then nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. Ayana smiled faintly. This was exactly the lesson she herself had learned not long ago. Patience, observation, and respect could guide even the most impulsive actions. The rest of the group began to settle by the stream, their movements cautious but respectful. Ayana stayed with them, observing, guiding, and correcting where needed. She felt a sense of calm and purpose, unlike anything she had experienced before. She realized that leadership was not about taking or dominating, but about guiding, teaching, and protecting. Dakota approached her quietly, standing beside her without a word. She felt the weight of his presence and understood that this was his way of letting her know she had succeeded. "You have done well," he said finally. "Today you have faced strangers, guided them, and acted with wisdom. You have not used force. You have not acted out of anger. You have acted with courage, observation, and respect. That is the measure of a true warrior and a true leader." Ayana's chest swelled with pride. She had faced her fear, the challenge of the canyon, and now the responsibility of guiding others. She realized that the lessons of the plains were not easy, but they were powerful and lasting. She had learned that strength alone was not enough. Wisdom, patience, and respect were far more important. "Thank you, Chief Dakota," she said softly, "for guiding me, for teaching me, and for trusting me." Dakota nodded, his eyes calm and steady. "It is not I who guided you alone. The plains, the canyon, the stream, and the people have all been your teachers. I only pointed the way. Remember the lessons, and you will walk with honor and wisdom wherever you go." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the plains. Ayana looked at the horizon, feeling a deep connection to the land, to Dakota, and to the people she had guided. She realized that her journey had changed her, not just in skill, but in understanding, patience, and respect. The strangers finished settling near the stream, offering thanks to Ayana for her guidance. They had come with fear and uncertainty, but they now felt safe and welcomed. Ayana watched them, a faint smile on her lips. She understood that true leadership was not about power, but about creating trust, understanding, and balance. Dakota stepped beside her, his gaze sweeping the plains. "One day," he said, "you will face even greater challenges. But you have learned the first lessons: courage guided by wisdom, patience balanced with action, and respect for all who share this land. These will serve you well in all that comes." Ayana nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose. She had learned much, but she knew there was still more to discover. The plains were endless, full of challenges, lessons, and life. She was ready to face them, guided by the teachings of Dakota and the wisdom she had gained. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange, red, and purple, Ayana felt a sense of peace. She had faced her fears, learned the ways of the land, and understood the meaning of respect, courage, and leadership. The plains were alive around her, a living teacher that would continue to guide her for the rest of her life. Dakota placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You have done well, Ayana. Today, you have become more than a student. You have become a part of the plains, a part of this people, and a part of the lessons that will carry on for generations. Remember this and honor it always." Ayana smiled, feeling the weight of his words settle into her heart. She looked at the horizon, the colors of the sunset reflecting in her eyes, and realized that she was no longer the stranger who had taken what was not hers. She was a warrior, a guide, and a student of the land. She was ready to walk with honor, guided by the wisdom of the chief and the lessons of the plains. The wind whispered through the grasses, carrying the stories of the day across the endless horizon. Ayana knew that she had learned something far greater than cleverness or survival. She had learned the power of respect, patience, courage, and wisdom. And as she stood there with Chief Dakota, watching the last light of the sun fade into the night, she felt the deep, unshakable truth that the name of a chief and the lessons behind it were more powerful than anything she had ever known.